wherever you're joining me. My name is Dr. Kitsalika, your favorite witch doctor. So today I'm here to look at a witchcraft case in Zimbabwe called the Witches of Zaka. To those who are not aware, there's been a phenomena in an area in Zimbabwe called Zaka, in which there's an allegation that one in five individuals in that area are witches. So today I'm going to do a short presentation on what's been said, criminological context, the forensic context, the crime scene context, the beliefs, and also challenging our individual critical thinking in matters around witchcraft beliefs and harmful practices. So before I go into the details, the issues I already mentioned, the landscape is like 1 in 5 households. As to how that was calculated is another issue altogether, because I'm just going to delve into other matters. But it also speaks to the understanding of the people around that, how that calculation was made, and the bias that goes into it in terms of qualitatively and quantitatively. And likelihood, most of those people who are being told that witches are women, which explains a lot. And also there's issues that hyenas are being used for transport, snakes are being used for harvesting. There's also been a desecration of graves. So all these elements are present in this particular case in Zaka. So for my policing background, both in the UK and Zimbabwe, it's important that we look at facts, forensic evidence, your beliefs, whether you believe in your beliefs are correct, but your actions are accountable. So when a grave is disturbed, we don't immediately think about witches. We have to examine the forensic evidence. You can also look up my YouTube article in which I describe some of the elements that can go into the grave desecration. Some of it is opportunistic, some of it are obviously body harvesting, and some of it is still fear. And also the actions of animals is quite important when you are approaching issues around mass graves. When I'm looking at witchcraft cases, there are certain elements that are important in order to understand the offense, particularly looking at the offenders, the locations, and the intent. So the most important element that we have to grapple with is belief. As I mentioned previously, your beliefs are valid, but your actions are accountable. And also there's a lot of psychology that goes into in witchcraft. I'm going to do a single episode on the psychology of witchcraft by looking at certain cases, because there's a lot to talk about when it comes to psychology of witchcraft. To those other peripheral areas that you can look at is magicians. So, people manipulate people all the time, either on stage or in private. I can do a few tricks as well. I'll probably do that in that psychology class. And also have to look at the victims. As criminologists, when a crime occurs, there's certain elements that have to be present. There has to be a motivated offender, there has to be a suitable victim, and there has to be lack of a culpable guidance. So if you apply those three elements to some of these things we're going to see, you're going to see the victim, you're going to see the offender, and you're going to see a capable guidance in that regard as well. That's how we explain certain crimes in a criminological context. And another huge element that has to be considered is the investigation element of some of these crimes. At the moment, as we all know, most of them is poor investigation, as you will see. There's be allegations, there's a lot of forensic evidence that get lost around witchcraft and harmful practices due to mainly fear, belief by the officers themselves, the environment, and lack of professional etiquette. So those elements are quite important when looking at witchcraft crimes. So each element has got so much to go through. So I will do a different episode explaining those elements as well. And also an underlying pillar you will see in this case that will look in Zaka, economic stress. Whenever there's an economic stress in any environment, it triggers different types of crimes. Whether we're talking in Manchester, whether we're talking in Zaka, in places like in the Western Europe, economic stress in certain neighborhood can trigger antisocial behavior, can trigger certain types of crime. No different to that. And if there's another trigger, for example, in the Zaka case, when there's social friction, the lack of resources by ordinary people and the gap, we all see, like in Zimbabwe, some people survive on less than $1 a day or a week, and then some people spend $500 on a night out. So the disparity in those individuals can be quite problematic. And also, as I mentioned, when I mentioned the type of people who are normally labeled witches are normally like women, so cognitive bias within community. So we pass on generational trauma from one generation to other due to our recruitment policy in terms of culture, which, if I'm a father who believes in certain beliefs, I pass on that to my children. Luckily for me, I don't. So, and then all those three, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and then the witchcraft aspect then escalates because individuals don't know how to explain certain things that have happened in society that they've never heard before or never quite understood. So when we're looking at witchcraft practices, when I'm looking at different types of case studies, there's always the supernatural narrative, then physical act and forensic reality. There's always claims that people can do certain things. I always ask people who do those claims, show us a tool, show us an app, show us a peer-reviewed paper, show us your own indigenous knowledge and interpret it in a way that we can use widely. Same as we have done with all other tools in society, in medicine, in engineering, in education. Whenever you've got an idea, translate it so everyone else can have. Yeah. As I mentioned, there's the issue around witches digging out graves at night. That's possible. That happens everywhere. That does not happen in Zaka only. That happens in Manchester. That happens in everywhere else in the world. Snakes and creatures sent to drain maize harvest. Everywhere in Australia, there's more snakes in Australia than in Zimbabwe. And then yet we've got more snakes doing all sorts of things in Zimbabwe. And there's never been seen. As you can see from the original drone footage, we can actually put a drone in those fields. We can put a satellite at night and we can monitor and we can prove these claims. The reason why we don't put monitors and things like that is because it's not feasible unless there's people demonstrate that. Yeah. So we have to measure the ability of that animal to do certain things. Yeah. The next issue we only have to look at who pays the price is mainly the victims. Very often, as you all know, in these witchcraft practices, the victims are mostly women, children, poor. That's why you don't find these healers living in suburbs. There's no, as far as I'm aware, I've never seen a healer who's on a billionaire list or anything like that. They make a lot of claims. So very often are poor people who are part of that matrix. I'm part of the International Network for Against Harmful Practices, which we look at those particular issues. I look at witchcraft practices in a forensic context. I'm using my skills in the police, and I'm using my own experience and growing around those particular practices. Witchcraft practices are not cultural quirks. Human beings made things along the way. There is a difference between harmful practices and harmful practices that harm. If somebody has a powder to assist somebody, for example, for fertility, as long as it's not harmful, if it's given openly, that's fine. If a businessman wants to get rich, but they don't want to skip a few steps and they want to get something else, then it becomes harmful. So those are the contexts that which I'll be looking at. In addition to that, I actually have got a tool to investigate some of these crimes, in terms of analysis of offender, victims of offense, and crime scene location. I can actually do this using my application called Spirit. It's quite simple. It's basically an amalgamation of policing system and some knowledge around harmful practices in terms of investigation, in terms of body parts, in terms of modus operandi of the individuals within the scene. So you will see that those elements within witchcraft practices, they also produce what we call ritual violence. And we can always investigate ritual violence using different types of methodologies, as you will see. Every contact leaves a trace. We'll see some of that. So my kind of mantra is, please, you've not been bewitched. So let's have a look at this case and see what's been allegated. So there's an allegation of body desecration. That happens again in every community. Who does that? As again, in those elements, opportunistic people who are actually interested in body parts, animal scavenging, and all the other elements that can come in. How can we unpack this? A full forensic analysis of that scene. Yeah, soil evidence, pictures, footprints, DNA evidence. We can even sometimes use satellite imagery Yeah, if it's a series of crimes, somebody who's worked for the police, everyone knows whenever there's a crime series, we document those crime series, the patterns, and then we try and, you know, look down for the behavior for the offender. So in regards to these particular sites, they can be fully investigated. Every undergraduate officer here in England and maybe in Zimbabwe to some extent, you do crime scene analysis of this thing. It is quite simple and straightforward in terms of gathering evidence. Because at the moment, when you get images like this, it's just an image. What sort of investigation has taken place? Who else has been there? So we can actually pattern this within Zaka. If they give me the data, how many sites have been desecrated, what time, what's been harvested, we can put it in my tool, for example, and run an analysis, and we can find results for that one. So many allegations are also made within the documentary. So example, waking up, finding your underwear missing, slightly hilarious, but that's the reality. Again, it could be anything. Again, we don't know if it's true. How many times has that been recorded? Has that been happening somewhere else? Does it happen in Egypt? Does it happen in Zimbabwe only? Does it happen in Zaka? Is it a replication of another story? So this story has been replicated so many times. It could be explained by, it could be psychosis, mental health. You know, people might take off their underwear because of psychosis or mental health, or they've been told to do so, or they've been given hallucinogens, because you can give people some stuff if you're in the local community, and if you want to manipulate an individual, you can give him, for example, mushrooms. Yeah, anything. So how many underwear has been missing? What type of underwear has been missing? What time has it gone missing? Can we apply digital technologies to that? Yes, we can. Can we tag the underwear? Can we put a microchip on those underwear so that we can trace where, if it's gone from this household to that, or we can track that? Yeah, we can use microchips easy on that, and we can find out. That's not been done. Snakes in the field, snakes on the plane, snakes go everywhere. Zimbabwe's will law snakes like any other country, but there's no image or video of any snake that's done anything extraordinary other than with the ones we saw, they see them eating people and being poisonous. So this claim, it cannot be validated based on the information that we already have. Again, it's fear mongering. It benefits the people who are coming up with those issue. That has not been proven. Other places have got snakes and nothing of that nature has been happening. There's a witch in every 5 households. That statistics obviously was just been pulled around based on the number of area and then division, some division. I don't know what sort of witchcraft division went on there. Yes, but it's basically because of the number of maybe women or number of older women. I put my money on that are just been being accused of witches because they are old or they act in a certain way, or some of them may have mental health issues, some of them have got disability issues, and some of them have got neurodiversity issues. And those, particularly on neurodiversity, those things are not very undiagnosed in Zimbabwe, again, because of lack of knowledge and of information. People who are peculiar, who've got anything peculiar, are easily identified as witches. Instruments, objects that always use in any crime scene, whether it's witchcraft or any other type of crime, that can be analyzed, weighed, compared to something else, and we can get the answer. They always claim they've got objects, instruments. You can find them online, but none of them has ever been reviewed, even amongst themselves. They cannot explain it themselves. So you can always take that word for that. So what they normally do, people like this, they will normally take what I've seen. Obviously, you can find this on YouTube. It's basically some animal part that'll be modified depending on whom you want to. For example, if you want to a particular type of advantage in society, you can have something done all made up. Why? Because we don't have an archive of them, comprehensive archive to demonstrate some of those things. So what normally happens, like if misinformation like that continues, you end up like people believing that you can just see a witch during the day. Even saying that to yourself is, I don't think it is safe like that. Just saying you can just identify a person by the witch. And also, you know, in terms of fear, it generates fear within the community. Even the young people being interviewed actually believe that story. that they can just give you a warning and something happens. Actually, that actually works if you believe it. Sometimes, yeah, because it can cause your own psychological health. It can trigger you, yeah, because people can be triggered in different ways. So some of these people they are able to trigger people in different ways, and then you think you've been bewitched, but you've just been manipulated. And also the claim that the witch can travel in a basket. Ironically, Zimbabwe is the only country in the world which has convicted a woman for flying in a basket. The only country in the world, one. There was no video evidence, there was no forensic evidence that can happen. You can if you can find a basket, you need to appreciate the biology, physics, and chemistry, and individuals' ability to fly. You can go on YouTube and you can see how silly it can be. So that's self-explanatory. If anybody wants any more explanation on how you can fit people in a basket and fly to another country, and also why do you fly to the country not come back? Why don't you do something useful, rob a bank or something, and then we can believe you and then be rich? And most of the time, they're poor. If you travel to America from Zaka, why are you coming back to Zimbabwe for? Where are you going to these other African countries? You would stay there, would you? Yet no one which has ever been recorded to do that. Yeah, we saw people try and go to space for 6 seconds, like Katy Perry. That is far as we can do. Yeah, and also we have satellite imagery that we can do what we call retrospective mapping. If you give me the coordinates of the village of Zaka, we can work called reverse image mapping on the satellite if we was flying that way and see if there was any witches there. And that's not been done, but it can be done, but I don't think we'll find anything. It'll be the same result that we're looking for. And also, you can see when I mentioned from the beginning, victims, offenders, opportunities. In the clip, we see one of the chiefs saying is a representative of those witches. And what role does he play? What dual role, triple role does he play, being the gatekeeper, the judge, the prosecutor, and also friends with the alleged witches? As you can see from that clip, that lady next to her tell the young men to go home, because otherwise, uno nongwa toka. What it means is, like, when you walk past, they'll pick traces of sand from your footprint and then use it to bewitch you in whichever way they think it is. And also, like, the fear also adds to what the witches are trying to achieve. For example, if they want to have meetings, they'll make sure people don't walk at night, be fearful. Yeah. So they create that so that when it's nighttime, they can plan things. Yeah, this is the perfect time for them to plant their evidence and do other stuff. And also, there are people who then, because there's a void in knowledge, enter different characters who say they can beat, they can cure certain ailments, snake bites, for example, scorpions. We can Google this. We're in 2026. We know what happens with the snake bite. We know what happens with scorpions. We know the treatment for those particular things. So that cannot happen. Yeah. So unfortunately, again, these individuals are also part of what called the Witchcraft intelligence network. So this individual who claim these things, a lot of people come to them, they end up with more information. And if they know somebody else who's got more information, they can have some sort of partnership. I mean, no doubt this person is in contact with the chief, which chief will say their legal representative. That group becomes that matrix that are involved in those cases in which no forensic officer has even been offered and no analysis has been offered other than stories. Yeah. And he believes that the snakes are saying, why do the witches only send snakes? Why not other animals? Because it's a very good narrative. It's got Bible element in there. It makes a good story. There are different types of snakes. We all know that different types of snakes do different types of things. But to actually send a snake, that's strictly in the movie. And also, they claim to have stuff with them. As you can see in there, there's nothing. It's a wooden box with a knife, with some powders, different type of boiled powders. This type of setup is quite similar when it comes to some of these characters. It would be actually interesting for me to do an episode on these particular objects themselves, because they're very interesting in how they are constructed and how nobody challenges in them. And also when they are very, very come across people destroy them. I know from personal experience how people have destroyed objects belonging to people I know because of misunderstanding. So no one bothers to measure this, do a soil analysis, because there's a lot of evidence in that thing if it has been used multiple times to do various things. So that has to be, no analysis again. That's something that needs to be done. Hyenas for transport, again, fear. If hyenas are local to the community, yes, they're scavenging animals. They are also responsible for the grave digger sometimes. Yeah, so it's given. So hyenas cannot transport human beings. If they do, let's demonstrate that. Yeah, same as owls. Owls are very interesting because of how they look, but actually a better animal to use to spy your neighbors is a dove. You can all Google this. Even doves were used in intelligence, not owls. Yeah, owls are interesting because of how they look, but there's no power that they can have. You can actually use a dove. I'm not encouraging people to do that, but you can. Anything that I'm saying right now is also available on Google. You can Google some of the stuff that I'm saying. So again, no reports, no papers around that issue. And government information, all that information is incorrect. Yeah. So I thought I wanted to show you a whistle-stop tour of these myths that have been raised in this particular village in Zaka in Zimbabwe. The allegation about 1 in 5 people being witches, the allegation about snakes being used for transport, hyenas being used for transport, snakes being used for harvesting, grave desecration. All those elements can be debunked based on available information. As you can see in the YouTube, you can fly a drone there. We can do set-night analysis. None of that stuff has been done. A very important element in that is poverty, lack of information, and then it breeds this particular type of environment. So thank you very much for listening. Please like and share. And I thought I'll just give you a taste on peripheral aspects of my book. Thank you very much for watching, and bye.